Got it.
Hi, we're here today with Jon-Paul of Destination Management. Did I get that correct?
That's right. Destination Management Advisors.
Perfect. And we're with the Tillamook County Pioneer, and this is our ongoing podcast series focused on a community and largely nonprofits, but also organizations that are community development organizations or people who are interested in the community and want or have interesting projects. So before I start rambling too much, I'm going to let Jon-Paul introduce himself and some of the programs that he has going on.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate it. I'm glad to be here, especially because we're having a really rich conversation with the community right now about the future and about how transportation infrastructure, and especially this PATH project, uphold the community's values and prepare for the future. I'm a small business owner, and my company is really focused on amplifying rural voices and bringing resources to rural communities. A lot of the work that we do is in tourism and destination management. And basically, we're saying, hey, tourism should benefit residents and local communities. Maybe that means more, maybe it means less. It certainly means planning and having conversations about how folks are impacted by tourism growth that, I think for a lot of folks has felt out of control or a bit oppressive in the last few years, especially in some places on the coast. So I love the work that we do. I'm a country boy myself from Oregon, and we know there's a really big gap in how federal resources, especially, but even state, get to rural communities. So this project is a great opportunity for Rockaway to benefit from state and federal tax dollars. And we're in a really important phase of talking with folks and asking them where it should go, what it should do, what concerns they have. So I appreciate the chance to talk with you and would love for folks to get a hold of us by email or take the survey about the project so that we can make sure we're taken into account.
Yeah, why don't you talk a little bit about the project that you have going on right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a community path project, and the idea is designing a pedestrian and cycling path that would connect Rockaway between Washington Street and Beach Street, so all the way up to Nadana Beach. Really importantly, also, it would provide a separated path for our students to get to and from school, to Neocani schools.
Essential.
Residential areas. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, that's absolutely essential. If anybody is familiar with the area, Rockaway is essentially a long, narrow city. Lots of hills. It's buffeted by forest land on the east side and the Pacific Ocean on the west side, with the Highway 101, I wouldn't say bisecting it, but sort of bisecting it a little bit. And the school for most of the area's high schoolers is right off the highway at the north end of town. So it's extremely dangerous for a lot of people if you're walking, cycling, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. Good point. And then the other, another key piece of it is how can we help benefit local businesses? My work and, the city's priorities that really have a bias towards benefiting local businesses. And to your point about Rockaway being really bisected, and truly it is, it's really challenging. There's a lot of turnover in the businesses, the storefronts that are north and south of downtown. There's not a lot of parking necessarily. And there's just really no safe connectivity, either crossing 101 or moving north and south. So this project would be, I think, really transformational in a very positive way. In all those things that we just talked about.
Yeah, let's dig into how far along in this project are you? Is it in conceptual phases? How are you getting funding? I know those are two very big questions, so I'll let you answer one or both.
Great. So folks have heard about this project for a long time, and I think they've heard about it under the banner of Salmonberry Trail or Oregon Coast Trail. So I want to mention that this would be the first section of that grander plan of the Salmonberry Trail along the north coast, but connecting up to Tillamook's and then Hookwart and Slough and Tillamook. That aside, that's a massive project. It's a really wonderful vision. This project specifically would be the first piece of that, and really beneficial to Rockaway and to residents. regardless of the future connectivity. The phase that this project in is that the city has received a significant amount of funding from the federal government for refinement or planning and design. And so that work needs to be done before funds can be raised for construction. Additional money can be brought in. And a really important part of planning in this phase is talking to the community. Transportation infrastructure especially has really lasting impacts on how people connect with each other and with nature. You brought up 101. When 101 was put in, it truly did bisect almost all communities on the North Coast. And
everything but Manzanita, as far as I can tell.
That's right. And you actually can really see, even with Cannon Beach, you can see a difference where there's at least a pull off. And then what that does in terms of walkability, cycling, just the way the built environment influences where people go and how they go. There are some cases where there's been good community engagement and that new infrastructure serves communities well. And we've all seen plenty of cases where you kind of scratch your head and deal with the implications, often for decades or generations.
Yeah, that's a very good point. One of the things that the Oregon coast is, I wouldn't say suffering from, but there's probably a better word than suffering from, but there's definitely a lack of accessible trails. Most of the trails out here are narrow, they are not paved, they are very steep, lots of inclines. A lot of them during the winter aren't even passable. So if you want to get outside on the Oregon coast, there are very few places outside of dry sand, wet sand that anyone can access. So if you have any disability, the Oregon coast is kind of off limits to you a little bit. There are a few places where that's not true, but for the most part.
There are so many important points in there I can't wait to talk about. Before I get too excited about that, I do want to mention that we have opportunities for the public to engage and give input. And so before we get too much further on, I want to let folks know that hopefully you're seeing posters around town and received a mailer. The posters have a QR code that take you to a survey where you can check out some potential alignment maps and let us know the good, the bad, the ugly of those. That's also on the city's website under the Salmonberry Trail project page. So there's a link to get into that survey. You can also email us at I'm sorry.
We'll come back to it.
Yeah,
It'll take you a second. Yes, okay. At the end.
That
yes,
sounds good.
I totally understand.
I just want to, thank you. It's so important.
And I'll make sure, absolutely. And I'll make sure to, in the article, the follow-up article, I'll have the links to everything. It'll be in the video. So don't feel like you need to have that off the top of your head.
Thank you. So, your point about access is important on a few levels. I grew up with family in Tillamook County. And, remember specifically a conversation I had with my cousin and his friends who are all coasties. And, they had that kind of typical teenage perspective of there's just not that much to do around here. And, what kind of trouble might we get into? And it was so funny because, not being from there like they were, I just saw as a visitor all this tremendous beauty around me. And, it was enough to go out on the beach. Later in life, being in this vocation and career and understanding better, particularly the barriers that some rural communities often have, that people who don't have as high a household income have, or any type of accessibility issues, whether that is ADA or age related, and that's older folks and people with kids. I see it in a whole new light. And so there really is a barrier to accessing nature, especially for residents. And that is just a little bit mind-blowing, I think, for folks who maybe don't live at the coast or haven't really wrestled with these issues. And that's really central to the ethos of my business and this project here is providing more opportunity for folks to get into nature, lead healthier lifestyles. The physical and mental health benefits are just innumerable and undeniable at this point. And it's
Absolutely.
I'm endlessly fascinated by how infrastructure can encourage or discourage.
Absolutely. Yeah. You bring up a really great point. I in the Wayback Machine in my brain, there's something I read about people who have access to parks or outdoor spaces, regular, have better mental health statistics, outcomes. There's just every single metric that they measure. When people can get outside into green spaces, they're happier, they're healthier, the communities have less crime. Obviously, there is a little bit of correlation, it's not causation, but for the most part, we can all kind of get behind having an outdoor space is really vital. Why don't we dig into a little bit about the process for getting this path started? Obviously, we've got a survey, we've got some design work that needs to happen. Yeah. But in terms of what the next steps are, what are some of the next dates that people should expect to see this project move forward?
Great question. One of the key dates is the state of the city, state of the city address, where city council has invited me to be a part of that event. That's later in July, I believe the 19th. And we'll have a community workshop, essentially, where we'll have big printouts of the 4 different options that have been presented and a summary of what we've heard so far. And it's really engaging conversation to drill down on those things. So it's a great chance for folks to come voice their opinion. And we know there's a lot of optimism. We know that there are some concerns as well. And we want to hear them all and make sure that they're reflected in the work, in the design.
That's wonderful. Before you move away from that point, I wanted to ask, are there people who don't want the trail? It kind of seems like everyone would want something like this, but are there people who are not happy with the idea?
Yeah, there are a couple of concerns that have arisen consistently. The biggest concern is that it won't happen or isn't happening fast enough. So I think you've got your finger on the pulse there. There are some concerns also about cost. And then, I want to be really clear that the city is doing a tremendous job bringing in funds that are not from residents. They're not city funds, county funds. There is some match and some resource, obviously, but
these funds would not be available or used for anything else, or would not even be in the community were it not for this project. And I think that you're exactly right, that's an incredibly important point to emphasize.
Yeah. So we're doing the work that we're doing now is community focused. In the fall, there will be a technical design team that takes this work and adds to it. So that project has a $750,000 price tag, and those funds are specific to active transportation projects. So it's a big win for the city to bring that funding into Rockaway, and that's not coming out of city coffers. And the project is set up so that when it's ready to apply for construction funding, that would be largely federal and state dollars as well. So,
yeah. Do you have an estimate of how much this project might cost after the design phase for implementation?
Part of the upcoming work is going to give us a realistic cost estimate, based on input from engineers and geologists and all those folks. In general terms, right now, active transportation, which is generally a 10 to 12 foot wide paved surface, is potentially around $4 million a mile, which sounds eye popping, and it is quite expensive. However, when that's related to transportation infrastructure projects, a new parking lot or road repair, extending a shoulder, it's really at the lower end of that type of infrastructure. So one of the things I want to emphasize is this is often talked about as a trail, and it certainly is, and it will provide access to nature trails and more beaches. It's a piece of active transportation infrastructure that will certainly influence how people move in and around town.
Absolutely. And for context, I recently read that the dome in Las Vegas was somewhere over $2 billion to construct, and it is just a big dome that essentially is a dome TV, and its only purpose is for entertainment. So
Yeah. So that, that is one of the main concerns is how much will this cost and who's paying for it? Unfortunately, we have a really good response. And then just in terms of, kind of cost societally, I think investments in active transportation just go such a long way in health outcomes. And there's so much return on that investment that we have a hard time quantifying. But to your point earlier about people being healthier and happier when they're closer to nature and have access, I think we discount the built environment around us and the role of kind of society and government in that. We kind of berate ourselves for not walking more, being outside more. And then it kind of naturally happens when you're in the right place. And it just doesn't, no matter how much you scold yourself otherwise. And a lot of that's behavioral economics, is what is built around us and how hard or easy does it make for us to do certain things. And that's really at the heart of what we're working on here.
absolutely. And when you're talking about low impact projects that can spur economic development, these kinds of outdoor trails, there's really not a whole lot that you can do that would have a minimal impact on the surrounding environment and a positive impact on both tourism and the business community. That's also a positive impact for health outcomes. So it kind of seems like it's win-win-win from all of those angles.
I couldn't agree more. And, there are nuances to that. For example, the way downtown Rockaway, the traffic flows now with parking at the wayside and the train stop there. There is a pretty tremendous amount of congestion during the high season, during the summer. And so how could we, help develop infrastructure that encourages people to spread out? There are other places to get to the beach. There are businesses, that would really benefit from folks being able to walk a couple or a few blocks. Not to mention the city's doing incredible work making Lake Lytle more accessible. The new boardwalk trail is phenomenal. So having connectivity from this path to all those other assets where people can walk and bike not only gets those health and economic outcomes we're talking about, but will, if designed right, reduce congestion downtown and at those certain places that get especially busy and make life a little harder for residents trying to run an errand.
Absolutely. We only have a few more minutes left. So you mentioned that there is a survey. I'm assuming it's for Rockaway residents. And it's what kind of questions are you asking in the survey?
Yeah, great. So it's definitely for Rockaway residents. It's also for second homeowners, for people who work or own businesses in town, the community in kind of general terms without trying to be too much of a gatekeeper. What we're doing with the survey is trying to have a conversation, an internal conversation inside the house before it broadens to the planning, engineering, the port being the landowner, and ODOT's role in all of this. So we're asking questions like, what's important to you in terms of maintaining the values that are important in Rockaway? And those values we've heard are it's family friendly and accessible, that it is easy for folks to get around, that communities integrate. Rockaway is unique and wonderful because visitors are welcome. Second homeowners are largely welcome. And we're seeing a bit of a disconnect growing in other communities. So we're asking them what is important to them, reflecting what we've heard so far and checking in if that's right and what can be added to it. And then we're getting more specific on where the path could go specifically through downtown and what folks think of the four different options that are on the table right now. And the idea being that it's not a wrestle over one of them that will beat the others at this point, but what's right and what's wrong about these different options and how can we improve it before it goes into a rigorous technical process.
Fantastic. Well, if somebody wanted to learn more, where should they go?
They can go to the City of Rockaway Beaches website and find the button on the homepage for the Salmonberry Trail project. And there's some more information on the website there, as well as an email address. Feel free to reach out to us if you'd like to have a conversation, or if there's information that's not on the site, we'd be happy to provide it.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I would be happy to follow up with you if our audience has any questions and they let me know that I didn't ask something that was essential. I will follow up with you. But I think that we're almost out of time, so I'm going to wrap up. And this has been the Tillamook County Pioneers podcast series with mostly nonprofits, but also community projects. And this is certainly a worthy community project. So I'm really grateful to get to know you, Jon-Paul.
Hey, thanks so much for your time. It's been fun to talk, and I'd love to talk again more soon.
Likewise. I think I'm stopping. Hold on, the recording. There we go.